Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of where we are in the season, Carl, we would love to get your perspective on the hard to clay transition, and you can frame it in any way that you want. But for me, I'm curious, like when Kim first stepped on the clay court for clay season, what were you doing differently? What were you working on? What were the first things that you did? And what's the most important thing to focus on, in your opinion, when a player is making that transition?
Yeah, I think there's a technical element and there's a tactical element, right? So I mean the movement on the clay is different. I mean it's different on the green clay and the red clay. Maybe I don't know if you want to go in that direction, but it is a different type of clay that is used here in Europe, and actually being able to keep your balance with a split or without a split, because I know Kim, likes to split on the hard court as well, but being able to position yourself in a good way and still use that, what we call in technical terms, the ground force reaction is completely different. And on a hard court, you stop and normal people stand still, not Kim. She slides a little bit, Djokovic. But I think there's a technical element that is absolutely uh, different, substantially different on a hard court and a clay court. And I actually sometimes use a strange sentence, maybe. I say, you need to be faster on the clay court, because on the clay court, you need to slide into the ball and your loading of the shot takes a lot longer. You can't use the pace of the ball. So you need to produce that pace. You need to use a lot more rotational power. And therefore, in my opinion, it's not completely correct. You need to be faster on a clay court because the power that you need to generate takes more time. So that's like a technical element. And then in terms of tactical elements, you wouldn't, Craig O'Shaughnessy, who I'm sure, a lot of the listeners and yourselves also know, he talks about this aggressive margin and, winning a lot of points in 0-4. But even a guy like Nadal, on his statistics, he scores very high on winning the number of shots on a clay court. Now, you can easily misinterpret that because you don't associate Nadal with winning the majority of the short points in a match. We think of Nadal and we think about long rallies 4 meters behind the baseline, but ultimately it's only 1 point, right? But he just wins the majority of the points in 0-4 because he doesn't make any mistakes. So you have to be more patient. If you have this formula about the winners and then the forced errors, which are semi-winners minus the unforced errors, Nadal was the king of that. He was the king of that. And Jimmy Arias, one of your countrymen, says it's absolutely right as well. 0-4 is very important, but because the winner of the match wins the most points in 0-4, but also the loser of the match has lost the most points, and very often by making too many mistakes. So I would say there's a technical element of the movement, and there's a tactical element which is very much related to winners, forced errors, and unforced errors, that balance.
And Carl, so explain to me a little bit, or go through your thought process, because I feel like I was so young, where it was almost, blind trust in a sense, right? Whereas, okay, we're getting to the clay courts. Okay, this is how we're starting. And I remember doing lots of little like mini tennis drills where it was even without the racket, where it was literally learning to move and learning to have those quick feet and running around. And like, so explain to me a little bit, and I think also to the people at home, like the difference of, you cannot just adjust maybe over time, like we saw some players, like a Sharapova, who maybe didn't adjust so much, right, to playing on clay and adjusting the movement on clay. But in general, just explain to me a little bit, like, what was your thought process behind that? Like, okay, this is what I want her to improve. Like, she's really good on hard court when it comes to moving, and how can we make her just like, I found that the hardest thing that I found on clay was the adjustments of like, oh, it's popping up a little bit here. I gotta, take a couple more steps back, or I gotta move in closer, or like that constant adjustment. And then being patient was something that, after a while, I really started to probably get like frustrated with at times. So explain to me a little bit, like, how were you trying to get the start of the season for me to get my footing right? Like, what were some of those little drills that you always had me do, and Leighton at times as well?
Yeah, let's go back in time. Talking about Sharapova, it's interesting you say that she's, I think, won 4 or 5 Grand Slams, but the last 2 were the French.
French, yeah.
She's won on hard court first, and it was only several years later she actually managed to sort of find this balance on the clay, because hard court was obviously her most natural surface. And I think, talking about hard court, you worked on your clay court game already on a hard court, because something that traditionally I would do in February, March, when you're out of the tournaments and you prepare for the clay court, is just to make the net a little bit higher and put the single stick in the middle, or have the net a little bit higher. So it actually makes you think twice before you want to go for that winner, and have a minimum number of shots before the point is live, and actually extend the length of rallies a little bit, and make you a little bit more aware of constructing the point is more important. But when it comes to specifically to the sliding, obviously you're a very natural slider, if we can call it like that. But we mustn't forget that from a European perspective, in Belgium and in most countries around Belgium, we're playing on clay. Clay is the surface to play on. From April till September, October, you play on clay, and it's the red clay. There were at the times when we then had to prepare for, whether it's Miami or Australia, we had to either play indoors, or if the weather was nice in February, we had to go to Antwerp, where they had 2 hard courts. That was it. So you're talking about a culture of developing youngsters, which is completely different in Europe than in the States, where you can, barely find, green clay courts maybe, but red clay courts, I don't think there's too many of them in the States. So I think there was a natural...
In Indiana.
I have no idea
it's an inside joke. Oh. They tricked me last week on April Fool's Day.
we did it. Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Blair. Tell them.
We did an April Fool's joke with the help of the team, that there was an academy in Indiana that was offering a class on how to do the splits like Kim Clijsters. And I had not seen the image. It was an AI image. I had not seen it until they threw it up on the screen. It looked like
it was like a wooden chalet
in Switzerland.
Over red clay. I was like, in my head, I'm thinking, wow, like they actually have like red clay there. Like it looks like a legit European like red clay court club. Like
it was hilarious.
So they got me good.
That's a good one. Yeah. Now that we're in the Monte Carlo week, talking about the clay experience, and Kim just mentioned the mini tennis one, when there has been a period where Kim would like to go to the ATP tournaments, and an ATP player would like to come to the WTA tournaments. Monte Carlo was one of these events where Kim wanted to be around Leighton, and we went to practice not in the country club, but in a club nearby. And I remember one session when I was probably about 15 kilos lighter and a little bit fitter than now, that we started to do in the 2 service boxes. And I call it slide and slice, right? And you have to, every shot, you have to slide a little bit into the shot, and you can only slice, but you can move each other around in the 2 service boxes, but you cannot hit a winner. You can only place the ball.
Both sides,
and we
forehand and backhand. Yeah.
Yeah. Forehand and backhand slice, no volley, so you could move each other forwards, backwards, sideways. And we would often do that as a warm-up, up to 7, whatever, 1 tiebreak as a warm-up. But if you don't make any mistakes, it's a really tiring exercise. And there's been one session where we kept playing, let's do another set. If you miss every second ball, this is not a fun game. But if you control the ball well with your forehand slice, backhand slice, move each other around. We've done this for 45 minutes, Kim, and that was the practice. We were both dead. I was a little bit more dead than you, but that was it. But that would be more of a specific integrated clay court practice. We haven't hit a ball from the baseline. We just packed it up. And we were both dripping from sweat. Maybe Kim wanted to be back with Leighton in Monte Carlo. That's maybe possible too. But the session for me, the session for me, the session was over. It was a really good clay court session. And especially in the beginning of the season, I think is great, both from a tactical point of view, a mental point of view, not making a winner, having to keep the ball in play, and then obviously the physical element was huge if you had these long rallies. So yeah,
I just remember, like, when I was younger, I used to love the first days on clay. I loved, because it was something new, it was different, there was a different challenge. And then 2 weeks
not
into
so
it,
fun.
I was like, oh, I want to go back to the hard courts, because it was just the rallies were just lasting a lot longer than I wanted to in my head, and it was just harder for me to control the movement, and just the frustration would build up just a lot quicker. And although at times, like, I had some early on in my career, I had some of my best results, right? Like at the French Open, and even at times where I didn't feel like, I remember at times being confused, like I'm in the semifinal of the French Open and I'm not even feeling like I'm playing my best tennis. Like I don't, I'm not playing fully free that, like, the way that I do on a hard court, and it's just a little bit different on clay. But there's people out there that say, like, every clay court is the same and clay is clay, and I'm like, no. That's definitely not the case.
But I do think probably in the younger part of your career, you would have a natural advantage of having played on clay so much. Whereas as you became a seasoned professional in the top 10, there's more tournaments on hard court than on clay. So automatically you're going to lose towards your end of your career a little bit your natural advantage that you had, or you have to specifically work on it. What maybe Sharapova did. I don't know what she did to win the French Opens later in her career, but for you, there was a natural advantage. You didn't realize this, but you've been brought up on clay for 6-7 months of the year.
But I remember there were times too that you would tell me, like, even in the lead up tournaments before the French Open, where it was like, listen, like, you're not the only one who does not like playing on clay, right? Or who does not like the movement. Like, you sometimes forget as a player, because you get so absorbed with, like, oh, how am I feeling out there? But you forget that on the day, you just have to be good enough, to beat your opponent. And it was like, I remember when that got repeated over and over to me, that I was like, like, I just have to try and figure it out. And even if it's not with my best tennis, but my opponents, unless you're playing like a Justine or somebody like that who loves playing on clay, there's a lot of players who dislike and don't feel comfortable out there. And I think, once that kind of stuck into my head, and, I think I just felt a little bit more comfortable with knowing that maybe it doesn't always have to be with my best tennis or my, my A game, but it, the B level can be good enough.
It's a tough surface. It's one that exposes your weaknesses, I think, a little bit more. And you just have to be patient. But, whilst you get exposed, you can still win, just like you're saying there.
Right.
Absolutely.
But patience that's even on hard court. That's what, Carl would tell me, Blair. Like, I remember at where was it? The American tournaments. Was Eddie Herr, and those tournaments where, he would tell me, like, to hit 4 balls into the court. Like, that's what I had to focus on, 4 balls. Like make the first 4, and then you can start going for the winner. Like, that was, like, always was rushing, I feel like, when at a young age. So that also was important on hard court for me to be patient.
And it was very simple, because I would just sit in my face like with my 4 fingers like this.
That was when coaching wasn't allowed.
You see it? You see, coaching wasn't allowed. I still use the 4, and I made it into a just a little tip maybe for people that are listening with children or players that they're coaching that are not patient enough. When they want to go what I call testosterone tennis, right? The juniors, they're coming all of a sudden, they can hit a forehand, a backhand, a serve. And definitely on the boys' side, more testosterone. They start to go for crazy decisions. I said, go in your Jeep, a 4x4, right? So you have 4 shots cross court in the first 4 games of a match. And the analogy with the Jeep is, a Jeep gives you a safe feeling. It's when you're nervous at the beginning of a match, or you completely miss the start of the match, get in your Jeep. So I would tell young players, get in your Jeep. And that means, like, okay, let's take some of the decision making away. Let's just go cross court. And your opponents won't figure this out if you're playing a few games only cross court balls, but at least it gives you a chance to get some rhythm and to get into the match. So when you're nervous, a new tournament, first time, just get in your Jeep for 4 games, and then you can go in your Ferrari. But don't start off in your Ferrari straight away.
But explain to me a little bit the difference for somebody, let's say like Jessie. Like, what is it going to be like for her? Why is it going to be harder? You mentioned the higher tosses, but it's more slippery, right? Like, I think that's one of the bigger differences too. So explain your experience a little bit.
I think going back to your decisions, I think there's a social element at the time as well, which is different now. If you had played Miami and Indian Wells, the other way around, of course, you had been away for almost a month, okay? As a young girl, away from your family, without smartphone, without FaceTime, without Zoom. So these tournament blocks were a lot longer, and there was a social element from, listen, I want to go back to my family. Okay, so regardless of the green clay, I think you did want to go back to the red clay because it's more natural to you, and what actually in terms of the surface is different. I can understand that most of the Americans want to stay one more week in the States, in Charleston would have maybe more family around, and so on and so on. But the sliding is completely different. For sure, you would have been sliding on the green clay as well. But when, for instance, and there's a big difference, the red clay, I think, in my opinion, is more weather sensitive as well. So you play in Rome, where it's really hot and dry, and it becomes
dusty,
like really very dusty
like
and very, very slippery. You've got Roland Garros, where they dry out the clay. They put this white stuff on there to really dry. But then you play in Hamburg on clay, which is like very humid and is a lot slower. So there's different. The weather influences the red clay a lot more. And I think, like anything, it's like playing outdoors and indoors. Learning how to play with wind, is very important for young players, because you need to learn how to adjust. If you've never played with wind, you cannot adjust with wind from the side, wind from behind. And it's the same with clay. You need to, I think, the more variety of red clay you've experienced in hot countries and in Paris, I think the better it is. And the green clay, I think, is less, it's not the same substance. One is, we call it in Belgium bricolé. It's like bricks, it's like crushed bricks. And in general, the top layer is a lot finer, a lot thinner than the green, where the underneath, they've got a top layer to slide on the green clay. But underneath, have you ever slid or had been sliding on a green clay where your shoe goes almost into the thing? Right. You would not have that. Underneath, it's very, very hard. Whereas on the thing, if it rains on the red clay,
you can take a chunk out
it's so soft, and you have to repair it with your feet and stuff like that to make. So it's softer. The grit is the same. So you have to be more patient. The grip on the ball makes the top spin. If it's a little bit drier, jump up really high. It is different, and the results, to be honest, show it. Right, the people, the hardcore people, Pete Sampras. We're going in your era now. Pete Sampras, Lindsay Davenport, and all these players. They simply were not that successful on the red clay.